because Rishi Sunak, he was asked today whether or not he would potentially bring back Boris Johnson into the cabinet, so a la what's happened with David Cameron. And I've got to say, he didn't necessarily straightly rule that out. What would you make to that?
I think he probably should have just ruled it out. It does seem like a bit of an absurdity on the face of it. It's quite clear that Boris and Rishi don't get along. If he brought Boris back into the cabinet, it would be a huge distraction to have another former Prime Minister in there. The question would be repeated, is Boris about to go back into number 10? Is a challenge about to be mounted? I mean, perhaps in the, one in a million worlds where Rishi wins an election and is in a powerful kind of political position, he could bring back someone like Boris. I suppose you then also have to say, is Boris particularly popular? He's popular among some people, but a lot of people still hate him, and Partygate did a lot of damage to his reputation. And on top of that, would he be a competent minister? I don't think Boris was ever seen to be able to manage a kind of department or brief particularly well. Maybe there's some roles he could do well as more of kind of like a spokesperson, as a public figure, but it doesn't seem like he's really someone you put in a department because you want to see some kind of major reform done. That's not ever been Boris's focus on some specific policy detail.
Would you welcome Boris back into the bosom of cabinet?
I think this is a much less controversial topic than the last one, isn't it? I think it seems kind of desperate to suggest you might have Boris Johnson back. Although, to be honest, reading the story, I don't think Rishi Sunak did even suggest that. I think he was just trying to avoid the question. It seems maybe a bit of a non-story from The Telegraph, who were trying to fill some column inches. But.
What I find quite interesting, though, about politicians is they have an absolute special knack of avoiding questions. So when you see a politician ask a direct question, more often than not, they just go all around the houses and you're sitting there going, what's that got to do with the issue in hand? And what I find interesting about Rishi Sunak is on some controversial issues, he doesn't do that. Like he took that bet the other day with, I think it was Piers Morgan, I think it was £1,000 or whatever, I'll get someone, asylum seekers on the plane to Rwanda. And I sit there and I think, why wouldn't you have just said to Piers Morgan, you know what, I'm not going to give you that soundbite. It's not going to happen. I'm passionate and committed to my, my strategy, and I'm going to do everything that I can to make it possible. Speak to me in a year to see how I've got on.
I mean, you've got to remember, I think, Rishi Sunak's career, which was that he kept getting vastly over-promoted. He only became Chancellor because Sajid Javid got sacked because Dominic Cummings couldn't pick his advisor. And Rishi Sunak got put in that position because Dominic Cummings thought he would be sort of more pliable to his demands. And Rishi Sunak has suddenly found himself Prime Minister without much experience of being a politician and without the nous that one needs. I mean, he also does just seem socially quite strange. Even in that sort of interview we watched before where he was talking about, the tragic death of Brianna Ghey, he wasn't really managing to perform sincerity. He almost looked like he was sort of cracking a smile. Like he's a strange person. This is not, I don't think he's the manifestation of evil, right? I mean, maybe he's just quite an awkward person, but he doesn't seem to me someone who's particularly adept at coming across as sort of human and a good guy.
Do you like him? Rishi Sunak, I'll throw it open to you. I can almost hear you shouting at the screens, because I know that there's a great many of you out there who actually think that Boris Johnson shouldn't have been given the old heave-her Doreen. Says if Boris was to come back, it would be very interesting. She reckons he would stand a crack at becoming the next Tory leader. Well, what do you make to that one? John says, why on earth would he come back? Rob says, Boris Johnson is the only person who can now save the Tory party. And Wayne says, look, stop beating around the bush. Boris would never take the pay cuts. Where do you stand on it all?